So my first question to you would be, so Heavy Hole Podcast is a year and a half old. What has been the most rewarding part or thing that you've done so far?
Wow. Well, what's up? Yo, thanks for the interview. And the most rewarding thing, that's like a tough question. That's a swerve ball right off the bat.
Yeah.
The most rewarding thing, there's a lot of interviews. We've done so many great interviews. I've met a lot of people. You're asking me, you're not even asking me like top three.
No, yeah.
So
I'm just going for the fucking number one.
All right, the thing that popped up right in my gut that I'm going to say off the top of the head is the Steve Grimmett interview, the classic lead singer of Grim Reaper and all his other projects. I just reached out to him on a whim, and he shot me back. Sometimes you reach out to people and you say, like, this guy will never even get back to me.
Right.
And within 5 minutes, they just shoot right back, like, hey, man, sounds fun, And
yeah,
Steve Grimmett was the most down-to-earth, awesome dude. For somebody with a legacy like that, he was totally down to earth and humble and respectful. And we had a serious audio snafu when we actually got him, and we lost a lot of that interview initially, and had to come back and apologize to him and reschedule the interview and redo it. And we did it. And he was the most understanding dude about it. Not even, nothing about him. He didn't care. He like made a joke out of it, and it was all good. And if you listen to the interview, he's got an incredible story from his whole career, and then even into like his tragic accident. He lost his leg, and that's one of the most painful, like difficult to listen to stories I think I've ever had to listen to on the podcast. Is the story of him getting his leg amputated. You can go back and check it out, and it's got a kind of a happy ending with him back on the road. And we even got to meet him when Grim Reaper performed here on Long Island, a few months later. So that was like, if I got to pick one thing, I was super proud of that, and I still am. And that's kind of like set the bar very high for what we want to do with the podcast. So I got to say, Steve Grimmett, Grim Reaper, man, is still that's like one of my proudest achievements.
Right. So how has it made like a difference in your life?
The podcast?
Yeah, just like talking to musicians.
It's given me like kind of like a new lease on being a metalhead and being a fan, because I've been doing, Artificial Brain started around 08, 09. And since then, like Buckshot Facelift, my other band, has been doing a lot of things. I joined Afterbirth about 4 or 5 years ago, and I just I've been very busy the last decade, really, to sum it up.
Yeah.
And when you're busy as an artist doing all these things, it's hard for me sometimes to keep up with the climate of the scene, all the newer waves of metal and things that are going on, and you get burnt out, you know what I mean? And the podcast, like, reinvigorate, like every week for the podcast, I'm trying to find a new band to talk about. I'm trying to find an older record to talk about. It just makes you more excited about it as a fan. And like talking to all these people, I feel like I've been going to like accredited college for metal, for the last year and a half.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
I'm learning about all this shit I never knew, and hearing about it from people I never thought I'd have the opportunity to speak to, and obviously it doesn't hurt my bands and my projects to have connections and a broader network of people. So
I definitely feel the same way, because I play guitar. I played guitar for like 6-7 years. And I was in a band and stuff, and that got burnt out because we were playing the same set. And I don't know, man. I've been like, after listening to and talking to like very successful people, it's like, dude, I can do that too. It's just like I got to get my mindset in check and just do it.
Yeah, it's like a balance of like the real world and the metal world for everybody, So you say successful. That's the tricky part.
Yeah. Well, in my eyes, music is a tough industry to be successful in, like a businessman's aspect. But I'm talking like views, people coming to your shows, not money wise. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I do know what you mean, man. And in that respect, I consider myself very fortunate, even that in the underground death metal scene, I get the support that I do, man. We're very fortunate that people recognize, enough of what we do just to come and play a show at St. Vitus and all that, man. So
Yeah.
It's great when your work pays off a little bit. So yeah, it's definitely like a measure of success too. I know exactly what you mean, man. You gotta think of it like that in death metal for sure.
Yeah, especially in this genre. So if you had to pick 3 bands to go on a European tour, who would it be? And it can be a band that is dissolved or still relevant.
That makes it way tougher right there. That's crazy. Man. Well, wow. All right. I gotta zone in here right now because I could spend all day thinking about this, but I would have to say, Disgorge from Mexico.
Sweet.
The classic era when the guy Antimo was playing bass and singing. I've made the case that I'm a big fan of his on my podcast a lot of times and things. And obviously we would be opening for them because you can't follow that act up on stage. Let's see, who else, man? Oh, Cataclysm, but with the original singer, Sylvain, and with the guy Nick Miller on drums.
Sweet.
That's like the perfect Cataclysm lineup in my opinion. Again, my band would have to open this up because there's no way you could follow that act. That's crazy. And let's see, the third band, False Gods from here on Long Island, New York. So I had a bunch of like old drinking buddies of mine to like, keep around, and like those guys, if you get into trouble, those guys are like, they got your back, so that would be my like little strategic planning on that one.
You got the badasses on tour with you.
Yeah, those guys, the False Gods from Long Island, man. Mikey's the Stack Brothers and all those dudes, man. Those guys don't fuck around, man. But they're good guys, and they would like, they'd ground me, and they would have my back on this crazy tour that we'd be doing. So yeah, so that would be my 3: False Gods, and Disgorge and Cataclysm classic lineups.
Hell yeah. So what are some things that make Artificial Brain special to you versus Afterbirth, Buckshot, Facelift, like all of those bands?
Well, for me, it's like each band is a totally different group of people, a different dynamic, different social circle and all that, man. So I guess with Artificial Brain, we play for more people, and more people know we. But Artificial Brain tends to be, I think, it brings me out of my comfort zone a little bit in terms of the music that those guys write.
Yeah. And
I don't like when they send an instrumental to me to figure out. I have to listen to it several times to really understand what's going on.
It's no 4/4 signatures. It's all screwy in a good way.
Yeah, man. And even like Afterbirth is fairly technical and intricate, but in a way that is more natural to me and more of a 90s death metal, influence. Whereas like Cody from Afterbirth, the guitarist, or say the guys from Buckshot, I'm more familiar with the stuff that they listen to that influences them. Whereas in Artificial Brain, the stuff that influences those guys, I've gotten into a lot of new bands over the years from them. Like I never listened to Deathspell Omega. I never listened to Abagor. Never listened to Virus. A lot of bands until I started hanging out with the Artificial Brain guys. So that's why some of the stuff that they write is like counterintuitive to me. And then I kind of do what I do over it. So Artificial Brain is like it's not like my home territory, but that's good. It forces me to grow in a way.
Right.
So that's I'd say that.
So off of that, where do you gain inspiration to write lyrics about aliens and cyborgs?
Oh man, I've been drawing pictures and writing stuff about aliens and cyborgs since I was a little kid. Many people, it's all. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. I mean, it was at cartoons, pro wrestling, Alien, Terminator, Transformers. And then you get a little bit older, you start reading Isaac Asimov and Douglas Adams, and you know what I mean?
Right.
It's everywhere. And with Artificial Brain, I didn't, not that I didn't have a choice, but when I joined the band, because the band had been around jamming for, about a year or so, I don't think they had recorded anything at that point. I kind of joined as like the lead singer, and they said, we're a science fiction band. And I kind of could run with that any way I wanted, because that's a very broad, spectrum. But it was like, it was, in a way, it was almost a continuation of some of the stuff I was writing about in the band Biolich that I was in when I was like a teenager in my early 20s. It's just kind of like, instead of a gore angle, you're just kind of like doing a science fiction angle, man. So I don't know. I had an uncle who was super into science fiction and horror movies from back, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and he turned me on to a lot of that stuff. And from like 9 or 10 years old on, I knew all the old Universal horror movies. I knew the Quatermass movies, and just a lot of really key, like, old school stuff. So it runs in my family in a weird way. My uncle is Frank Henenlotter. He directs, like, I guess you could say, B horror movies, and he's well regarded in that field. He's like a close friend of the family, and he made sure that I had my history of that type of stuff very early on in life. So I credit him a lot with that too.
Gotcha. So what are so I know that you're on Profound Lore Records, and I always like to ask this question. What are some obscure albums that I should check out that I probably haven't heard that you like really look up to on that record label?
On Profound Lore. Let's see, right off the top of my head. Well, this is tough, man, because I'm trying to, like, I'm on the spur of the moment.
No, that's good. My one buddy, he was like, yeah, man, I want to do an interview. And I asked him really tough questions. And there was, like, I swear to God, 25, 30-second waits, pauses.
Yeah. Well, when we first signed with them, probably I think it was around 2013, 2014, and we put out Labyrinth Constellation, that was Portal. If you remember, 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, Portal was over like crazy. You know what I mean? And they're still an amazing band, but in that era, they were just dominating, and they had, I don't know, they were at Maryland Death Fest, I think, I want to say 2015, and there was a classic performance where they cut the sound and the lights on them, kind of like, because they played longer than the curfew, and they kept playing with just, I guess what they had on stage, and the whole crowd was there, and the security couldn't stop them or anything. And just Portal, man, being signed to Profound Lore, I've always associated with being proud, because that was Portal's label, right?
Yeah, I mean, Portal, to me, like, that shit, if you listen to it, like, it's just a wall of, like, noise that you can't really replicate without, I don't know, I've never heard a band like them.
Yeah, and when they came out, I didn't understand it at first. I think, like some people, and it requires multiple listens. And now I feel like they've influenced a lot of stuff that's coming out now that's really dissonant and noisy and it's like otherworldly in a way, I guess you could say. Right. And that, do you know the band, what are they called? Abyssal? I think they're from the UK.
I do not, unfortunately.
They're a really good band, Abyssal, from the UK. They put out an album. They're on Profound Lore, and they've put out some really amazing material that I want to say is somewhat in the Portal like realm,
yeah.
like hemisphere, but maybe a little bit more streamlined. I don't even, like, not streamlined, but just you can kind of see through the fog a little bit more when you're listening to them and understand the riffs. Kind of, they're like Portal adjacent, I guess, in a way. But their Abyssal is really good, man. And let's see, when Profound Lore signed Nocturnus, when Nocturnus came back,
nice.
I was really, obviously I'm a big Nocturnus fan from back in the day, and that plays kind of an influence in Artificial Brain. I don't know that it's influenced the instrumentals as much, but it's the idea of science fiction death metal to me goes back to Nocturnus.
Yeah.
So the idea that they came back and Profound Lore scooped them up just kind of reaffirmed to me that, like, Profound Lore was the place to be.
Right.
So, that and I really do like that newer Nocturnus album that came out. So that was cool. Oh, and while we're talking about stuff that kind of Profound Lore has put out, while we've been signed to them, Pissgrave. That was kind of a controversial album that came out last year, the Pissgrave album, because of the cover art.
Uh-huh.
And, we had a whole discussion on our podcast kind of based on that about the use of real gore imagery and everything. But I thought that record was really, I guess I'm trying to say it was ballsy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and,
it needed that artwork. It needed it.
Yeah, I appreciated it for that. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, I mean, off of that, because you kind of just pushed me right into that question is, has it been easy to be a part of Profound Lore? And do they enforce any type of restrictions on your band's music and artwork?
not that I know of, not that we've ever encountered. I mean, I guess we've never submitted anything that the guy didn't want to put out, Chris Bruni, but we've never, if anything, I feel like, just in terms of my experience with Artificial Brain, we've kind of had carte blanche. The guy lets us do whatever we want. We use who we want for art. We write lyrics how we want. The guy, Colin Marston has, we're pretty, sound on using Colin Marston as our producer. And we, obviously there's a connection already with Profound Lore because Colin's worked with, a few, more than a few of his bands. Yeah. But, I don't know that Artificial, I don't, Chris seems to be just from what I see of the lineup and what Profound Lore puts out. He's very, I guess, picky in a good way about what he puts out. He only puts out things that he really likes and believes in, and kind of like he, as a fan, I guess, that he wants to curate. So I don't think he would have picked up Artificial Brain unless, he was confident that we were going to do stuff that's in line with the label's vision, and
right.
We've never had any issues like that, and I've never heard anything like that. So
for sure. So you mentioned you guys had a new album coming, but it got delayed because of the virus. How would you describe the upcoming release versus everything previously that you've done?
Well, it was. I think you could probably say it's a little bit more technical, maybe in some more like kind of abstract, like jagged sounding ways, if that makes sense. Yeah. For me, as I said before, as the vocalist, getting the instrumentals and having to listen to them multiple times to really understand what's going on, it was a little bit more difficult this time. I think the album has like maybe technicality in a different way, and I think it's a little darker and maybe more black metal influenced in terms of the guitar work. Other than that, it's Artificial Brain. I'm not planning on reinventing the wheel with the vocals. Artificial Brain has a vocal style that I try to get the most out of every album, and not that I want it to be redundant or anything, but it's going to be Artificial Brain. There's not going to be any rap parts. There's not going to be any clean singing. There's you know what I mean, man. Like people are always going to have their album that they prefer over others, and some people are going to love this one, over the others, hopefully. And then there's going to be people that it's not Labyrinth Constellation. What are you doing? So, but I think it's going to be a little bit more jagged and cold sounding, if that makes sense.
No, that's a good answer, because I feel like every time I talk to people about that question, they're like, oh, we're reinventing the wheel, and I hope people like it. You know what I mean? Like, not many bands go, we are this, and if you don't like it, kiss my ass. Like,
yeah, I mean, we're Artificial Brain, and we're going to give you a different shade of Artificial Brain with each album,
Yeah. So production wise and lyrics, what are you trying to do differently within Afterbirth and Buckshot?
Well, with Afterbirth, I joined in 2016, and Afterbirth was originally around in the early 90s and cut 2 demos and broke up, and those demos went on to kind of be have like a cult following in the death metal scene. And I got into that stuff very early on when I was a teenager, and it really influenced my vocal style. The original singer, Matt Duncan, who has since passed away, he was one of the very first people to do that super guttural kind of like frog-like vocal back in the early 90s. So it was a big influence on me my whole life. And the band went through a really hard period, where they were kind of an instrumental group and they weren't doing much. And then I guess when they were ready to bring a singer into the fold, we had discussions, and it was basically just a kind of to record the original Time Traveler's Dilemma album and see where it goes from there. It was a really slow process, and now we've been together for a few years. We played shows. We have the new album, Four Dimensional Flesh, coming out. And my whole long-winded point of that is that my thing with Afterbirth is I just try to pay tribute to the original vocalist, Matt Duncan, with what I do. I try to make my vocals as low and guttural and brutal as possible. Yeah. I don't really try to do much different from what fans of the original material would expect in terms of vocals. The music has expanded incredibly since those early days of the 90s. These guys are very incredible musicians, and I'm proud to work with them. And the newer material is very technical and abstract in a lot of ways. They explore a lot of different atmosphere, and I try to keep the vocals kind of like the grounding force to the guttural, brutal death metal people. So with Afterbirth, I always want to be the most ignorant, guttural member of the band. That's
sweet.
That's kind of, for Afterbirth. And Afterbirth is really three guys. It's Cody on guitar, Dave Case, who's also in Helmet on bass, and Keith Harris on drums. And they've been playing music together since they were teenagers. And those guys, the album, when they record both albums, they recorded them live tracking with each other and things like that. That's how they do things. It's just kind of a different process, I guess, between all my bands. And working with those guys they just have such an old school, disciplined approach. They rehearse like clockwork every week, and they record live and all that. So I learned a lot from them with that. And then with Buckshot Facelift is my baby. Buckshot Facelift started in 2004. The bass player, Tom, I've known since 7th grade. He's still one of my best friends in the world. And, the other guy, everyone in Buckshot Facelift is more like a bowling team or a drinking club. I have varying kind of professional relationships with people in some of my bands, but Buckshot Facelift is kind of like,
your buddies.
Almost to our, even like the first decade of the band, it was to our detriment, really. And it was more of a party band, and then we started taking it more and more seriously through the years, and now it's kind of like a circus act. You know what I mean? We try to keep it under the blanket of grindcore, but there's death metal, there's hardcore. We throw all sorts of shit at the wall, and it's kind of like my playground as a vocalist. I can do whatever I want in Buckshot Facelift as long as the part calls for guttural, screaming, hardcore yelling, whatever. There's room for it all in Buckshot Facelift somewhere. So that's kind of that. And there's a new project. I know I mentioned this to you, called Reeking Aura, which 3 of the Buckshot Facelift guys are in. Terrell Granum, who plays guitar and Sadist as well in Buckshot, he's in that. Tom Andrew, who I talked about, is the bass player of Reeking Aura, and Rick Habib, who's the lead guitarist of Gray Skies Fallen, and in Buckshot Facelift, he's in Reeking Aura. And this is a project with Keith from Afterbirth on drums and Ryan Lipinski from Unearthly Trance on guitar. It's kind of like we joke around and call it a super group. I don't want to be on record really calling it a
I got
super
you.
Group, but so with Buckshot Facelift, we're a real tight-knit kind of family,
Yeah. Word. So my last probably tough question is, what are 3 things that nobody knows about you?
Oh boy, 3 things?
3. Yeah, not 1, 3.
I don't even tell anybody 1 thing. Now you want 3 things. 3 things. All right. Well, I'm going to go with a softball for the first one. Okay.
Yep.
I'm taking care of a feral cat right now. Right before this whole virus thing started, I have a feral cat that started coming around the backyard years and years ago, and we feed it. And it came up like the first Sunday. I took 2 weeks off of work. I work. Well, that's the second thing I'm going to tell you that people don't know is going to be my job. Okay. Yep. So I took some time off of work when this viral thing started, and I said I'm going to stay in the house. I'm not doing anything. And of course, this feral cat walks up with a huge wound, like it got bit by a raccoon or a dog or something.
Oh, wow.
So I had to take it to I had to strap a mask on my face and take it to the veterinarian and everything. And for the whole process, the whole time of this coronavirus thing, I've had this feral cat in a box in my room, and he's got food. He's got a cat. He's living the luxury right now. Don't worry about him. He's good. He's
AC and everything.
Yeah, this cat has never had better treatment. He's going to pull through. Everything's fine with him. They gave me the antibiotics. So that's what people might not have known that. I work a job at a group home with people who have disabilities.
Yep.
People, I might have mentioned that on the podcast, so some people know that, but people don't know that we got COVID positive people, adjacent to where I work. So it's been really stressful the last few days, and I'm just trying to be as safe as I can and take precautions and everything. So real life has kind of hit home in that regard.
Yeah.
But I've worked that job for 13 years now, and as stressful as it can be, even before this situation, I really do enjoy it. And it's something kind of without sounding like generic or corny, there is something fulfilling about the work and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's number 2 that people in the metal scene might not really know. Number 3. Trying to think, man. Number 3 that people might not know. I got a good one for number 3, man, and people might not even believe this. I can keep a beat on drums. I'm not like a death metal drummer or anything like that. I don't know double bass, but I can play drums to a certain extent, and I learned how to play drums and played for about 3 years in the the worship team, the praise and worship team of a evangelical Christian church.
Yep, I did the same thing.
Wow.
Guitar. I played acoustic guitar in the church band.
Well, I got to relate my experience too, because it gets a little bit more unbelievable, I think, maybe to some people who might know me from death metal. I was the only white guy in the entire church. The church was primarily people of Caribbean descent who had moved to the United States, and it was a very small congregation, maybe 20 or 30 people. The pastor is a good friend of mine from work, actually, so it was kind of like an underground church. It wasn't like this big money church, and it was a crazy experience for me. It definitely changed my outlook on a lot of things. And the thing was, the pastor, he actually had played. He's an older guy, and he had played since the 70s and 80s for a pretty famous reggae singer. And toured the world until he found, spirituality and wanted to be a musician that way. Mm-hmm. And he had grown up and learned how to play music in a conservatory in Jamaica. So this guy actually was able to give me really good drum lessons and really good pointers on how to play drums and everything there. So I learned a lot from that. It was a great experience.
So do you play guitar or anything, or just vocals and then drums?
Vocals and reggae church drums.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And I could rap, man. I've been rap, since I was 17. I've always freestyled. I have a SoundCloud where I record songs, but it's not something I take as seriously as the metal bands.